The image of bread is something that all of us are very familiar with. I don't know what your favorite bread is. It could be rye or whole wheat. And we've been told over the years that white bread isn't any good for us, so generally we shop for the right kind of bread to feed the family. When Jesus used this image, I am the bread of life, he was talking about what feeds your soul. It wasn't so much an appetite of what we eat from day to day to nourish our bodies, but he was trying to convey to those who were listening to him that there are some things that feed our souls, and we need to pay attention to that. You know, in the early days, the United Methodist Church was just known as the Methodist Movement. And all across this country, pastors, lay people, and clergy used to ride horseback to little communities. And my suspicion is that one of those circuit riders actually made their way somewhere in this vicinity. And when they met with the folks, and as rare as it was, the one thing they encouraged everybody to deal with when they gathered for worship, and probably in a community house of some sort, was to deal first with the question, how is it with your soul? And they expected those who were gathered there to talk about that. What were the struggles of your life spiritually? And how were they impacting the way that you lived and moved around the community and the surrounding area? Because the expectation was, and I think it's true when Jesus used this word, I am the bread of life, that whatever nourishes our souls determines how we live and act in community. You know, Jesus on another occasion reminded us that as we think in our hearts, so we are. And it isn't what we take in that condemns us, it's what comes out of us. And so when Jesus used this image of, I am the bread of life, he was trying to encourage those who heard him to think beyond just meeting the simple needs of everyday existence. That life is meant to be more than just simply making sure you have 3 meals a day or that you eat the right nutrition stuff. It was meant to be a matter of how you live and exist every day in relationships with each other. Now, those who first heard Jesus say this were disturbed and distressed by his comment. They had been so ingrained in religious traditions of their own that to begin to think about this in a different way was very upsetting and even distressing. You remember when I read from John's Gospel, the responders to what Jesus had said were, well, didn't he grow up in Nazareth? Isn't he the son of Mary and Joseph? I mean, Joseph is a simple carpenter. Mary is a simple homemaker. How can he stand before us and make such an outrageous claim as this? And so they were looking not at where he had come from so much in terms of his physical roots. They were seeing that, and they were not seeing the deeper images that he was trying to create in their understanding and in their thinking. You know, we spend a lot of time taking care of the outward person. And rightly so. I don't mean that as a criticism. But the outward person has such a potential and possibility beyond our imaginings when we pay attention to the soul. And when it is right with our souls, it becomes right with our relationships with each other. Not only those we know and love, but the very strangers. And isn't that what Jesus said? That when we are right with God, even the stranger becomes a brother or a sister or a person of concern for whom we share compassion and understanding. This faith we hold has such a potential to transform not just our own lives, but the very life of the world in which we exist every single day. When Paul wrote his letters to these churches, was that not his purpose in encouraging them to hold on to the wellness of their souls? Because they had to move and live and exist in a culture and a society that was not always receptive, understanding, or encouraging. Paul knew that if they were to accomplish what Christ had set them to do and to be, the way they lived out there was so critical and so important. Is that any different today? In every generation, the words of Jesus about "I am the bread of life" are designed to cause us to stop long enough to consider how it is with our souls, our spirits. And when we do that, we begin to understand that God is at work transforming and changing us in ways that help us to live in this world as what Paul called living witnesses. Now, it's important to understand that Jesus never backed down from what he had to say. He knew that those folk, in fact, if you will recall, just a short few verses before, he talks about himself as the bread of life. He said, "Why are you here? Why did you come all the way across the lake, finding me here in Capernaum? You're just hungry again? Did you come just to have another loaf of bread or another piece of fish? Why are you here?" I would like to think that his words somehow began to transform what they were aware of and what they were thinking. Maybe they said to themselves, "Why are we here? What has driven us and caused us to come all the way across this lake to this place to see Jesus again? What is it about this one whom God has sent that causes us to go out of our way to find out where he had gone and to engage once again in some kind of relationship?" I would like to think that there was a stirring within them about deeper needs of life. And that when he raised the question of "Why are you here?" it was sort of like opening a door for them to see beyond what had happened at the feeding of the 5,000, beyond what had driven them to cross Lake Galilee, to what Christ was really trying to do and say. You're here because you have a hunger for something more than just bread itself. I am the bread of life. Not just what you take in daily, but your very life itself. You know, so many times I have said, as I have shared the word with not just this church, but the churches that I have been privileged to serve, is the only thing you have is what? Your life. That's all you have. Not the clothes on your back. They'll go to Goodwill someday, maybe. Or maybe you'll wear them out. Not the shoes on your feet. Well, they might even go to the sunshine shop. But all of that is transitory. It comes and it goes as we grow and become. I think sometimes that many people shop over here for baby clothes because kids grow so fast. Why would you spend $40 on a little outfit for a child when they wear it for a month and a half? But isn't that really what life is about? We grow and we become. And what is it that we become? And I think that's what Jesus was saying to the multitudes who followed him to Capernaum. I think that's what Jesus was saying to all of those who heard him say, "I am the bread of life." What are we becoming? What transforming power is God at work creating within us so that this gift of life can somehow be everything that God intended it to be? And it's true, we all go through peaks and valleys. We all go through tough times. But even in the midst of that, God is holding out for us the potential and possibility that every life holds to make a difference in this world. Just recently, I received a magazine that's called World Vision. And it's a magazine about the mission work of a group called World Vision. And they talk about how they've interfaced with the children of this world to try to create a better life for them. By feeding, by providing fresh water, by doing all of the things that somehow enhance life in this world as a way of communicating beyond that about the soul, the needs of the human spirit. The people gathered who were of any official capacity at Capernaum began to murmur against Jesus. Why would he even say such a thing? How can somebody from Nazareth, and you know, at one point they said, can any good thing come from Nazareth? They held on to that pretty firmly over the life and ministry of Jesus, that somehow the roots of where he was born and where he was raised somehow made him less legitimate as a vehicle through whom God might speak a message to the world. Well, where were we born? And where were we raised? You know, I sometimes have to order things on the phone for the church. And when they say, "Can you give me the address?" I say, Box 47, South Sealy, New York. And they say, "What?" I say, "South Sealy, New York." And then there's this pause. And I say, "If you can spell it, we'll pay for it. If you can't spell it, it's free to us." And then there's an even longer pause. I'm only kidding, of course. But isn't it true? How many people know you're here? How many people know there is a place like this? And every once in a while, someone will drive through our community and they'll say, "I never knew there was such a beautiful place in upstate New York." Does somehow the fact that you are from here make you less legitimate as a vehicle for God? Does it somehow make it less likely that God would be at work in you and through you to make the world a better place? Of course not. God is not a respecter of persons, and that doesn't mean that God doesn't respect, care, and love about every one of us. It simply means that God will choose through whom God will work at God's will and at God's time. The bread of life. We should be a sweet aroma in the world. Now that may sound like a strange thing to say, but every time, I will say it again, I read Jesus saying, "I am the bread of life," I think about what it was like when I smelled my grandmother making pastries or fresh bread as I made my way home from school. God is at work trying to create a sweet aroma in the world, to remove the stink of pain and suffering and hostility. And how does God do that? God does that as Paul tried to convey to the church at Ephesus. Hold fast to those things that really represent the best of your soul, because the Spirit will work that out for you. And as you move and live and have your being wherever God places you, it isn't where you come from, it's to whom you belong. And it's if you can really hear what Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." I am the bread of life. Let me create in you that which will bear fruit for the good of the world and for the good of your brothers and sisters wherever you move, wherever you go, wherever you exist. If you do that, the world will be a better place. When Wesley encouraged those circuit riders to say, as they gathered with these small communities, "How is it with your soul?" I think that's the same question that Jesus was raising when he said, "I am the bread of life." If you hear what I'm saying, you will look inside and you will take a good long look at what is it that feeds your soul and how does that come out of you for the good of the world. Remember later in John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not die, but have everlasting life. God so loved the world. We are called to be lovers. Let us pray.